So I've spent the past few days, you know, with these beautiful songs. Amy sings Singing Over Bones, and Anju Makhijaji's, beautiful Seeking the Beloved, uh, Shah Abdul Latif. I'm sure most of you know. And of course, Manjul Bajaj, the songs of Meera, which has just come out. I'm sure years and years of work went into it, songs of Mirabai, and the book of Bulle Shah, only to realize that there's no I, and there's no time, there's no days, only to realize what is time, who am I. So with this, I would first of all, maybe if I begin with Amy, which maybe there's just song, you know, and she will begin with a hamd. Hamd is a song, it's an incantation and a prayer, and then of course, uh, talk, walk us through her own journey, uh, singing over the bones. Why sing over the bones? Uh, Going through life's experiences at such a young age, resulting in such beautiful songs. Amy.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, and lovely to see you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Let me begin by singing Hamd from Baris Shah's Heer. I am not a singer. मेरी आवाज़ बहुत अच्छी है, मेरे सुर बहुत ख़राब हैं, तो मैं पहले से ही माजरत के साथ अवल हमद खुदा दा विर्द कीजे इश्क कीता सुजगदा मूल मियां पहला आप है रब ने इश्क कीता हो ये माशूक है नबी रसूल मियां. First, we give praise to the God, the Creator, who made love the center of creation. He who one first loved, who was the first lover, and Prophet, his first beloved. So, with that, we begin today's session. Yeah, thank you so much for letting me sing Hamd.
Go on, no, please. Singing over bones, your own journey, and unravel some of it. The book you must read. It's her own journey, personal journey. She's gone through a lot, and then begins from gardens of Pinjore near Chandigarh, where she comes across this person and who seems to have kind of blessed her, left her with an impression, takes her to Lahore and back, and then maybe days and days and days she has spent expressing. So please walk us through that.
So, this book first itself, the name comes from Mexican lore, a folk tale, that there is a woman very old who wanders in the desert collecting the bones of dead wolf. And when she has the whole skeleton, she raises her arms and she begins to sing. And as she sings, the bones begin to flesh out and then they become furred and the wolf comes back to life and start breathing and running back into the desert. So that folk tale has always stayed with me. It's from Dr. Pinkola Estes' book called The Woman Who Ran with the Wolves. And that's what I've named this anthology after, because I think it saved my life too. And my life since has been an act of creative repair. But if I trace back the source of poetry or performance or expression in my life, I trace it back to the women in my lineage and to Khan Baba. I will read two poems and they will give you both the idea. Unlike Anju ji and Manjula ji, who have spent years of researching on the Sufis of our subcontinent. I come nowhere close in experience or in research. All I have are two poems rooted in personal lores and legends, and I'll read those out for you. Khan Baba. Year 1999, I am a 7-year-old girl with ancient eyes and curious hands. I want to understand everything my fingers touch. I want to know everything my gaze falls upon. We are out on a picnic at Pinjore Gardens, and there my eyes fell on him. To my 7-year-old self, he looked terrifying. A shirt with black lungi, white, untamed hair cascading like waterfalls over his shoulders. And I just wanted to disappear under the hem of my mother's Firozi suit. But before I could, he looked at my sister, who must have been 4, and said, "Kisi ki bazm mein guzre hue hai haseen lamhe, aake ji bhar ke tujhe pyar karu." That was a first sucker punch of a memory hole in my heart, and with my ancient eyes and curious hands, I learned that Khan Baba had no home, no food to eat, no family to call his own. He never accepted alms but wrote poetry on crumbled papers, feeding on words as if his life depended on them. Khan Baba smoked cigarettes, too many, one after the other, as if measuring the time not with the hands of a clock, but by the length of those burning sticks. Now you can do the maths. How many cigarettes it took to wait for the love of his life in the same garden for over 30 years. His love never returned. Perhaps he woke up with ashes in his mouth every morning, or poetry. Khan Baba carried so much sorrow and agony inside, but never gave an ounce, a drop of his sadness to anyone else. Instead, he took others' sadness and offered them temporary peace at the cost of his constant pain. Khan Baba died alone. In my dreams, he speaks still. Chala jao rahi, mujhe dekhne de khud apni tabahi. But I remain tethered to this spot where a 7-year-old girl once learned that love can be a lifelong vigil, a deathless hope.
Amy, can you sing one Punjabi one, please? The one you wrote in Punjabi.
About
Yeah, the Punjabi poem or the Hindi poem. There's one, yeah. Yeah.
I will read that in the end. I would, in the tradition of reading from personal histories, I'm going to read this one about my women in my ancestry. It's difficult to hold the mic and turn the pages. Thank you. It's called Daughters of Sky. My great-grandmother sat in a cold cauldron filled with winter, meditating, praying to the heavens for a child. Her husband wanted a son. She bore him a hurricane, a daughter, then another, and one more. All her daughters lived long in places they did not belong, like a deluge that falls too hard for too long. My grandmother sat in cemeteries more times than I care to count. She too wanted children, but lost them all. Some as young as a sigh, others earlier than decade 5. Some fell from her womb like drizzle, gone unnoticed in sleep, others like sand through the sieve, one by one, till there were none. My mother sat atop a mountain near hot water springs, wishing me into existence. She was a short, bright lightning strike. Nothing was same before and after her. I am her firstborn. I think I am rain. All women of my family, daughters of sky, probably fell on uninterested mountains and unwilling terrains. I think I'm rain. I have fallen on fertile ground. My hands are made of will, my feet of moss. I think I'm going to let my children come to me whenever they want, like mulberry trees that sprout up from childhood giggles, accidentally planted in the garden and staying long after you're gone, bearing fruits for generations to come after. This one is a very short, like a very small Punjabi poem. It's um, it's on the city that I come from. It's called Sheher. And one second. Why is that one that I can't find it? Can we come again later and maybe move on? Sure, thanks.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Erin. Beautiful. Anju, I mean, what to do with these eyes falling in love without asking me? Why search everywhere? Nearer than your breath is he. Just remove the screen between you and him. Shah Abdul Latif. इसके बारे में बात ही क्या करनी? It's so, I mean, each word, it's just that echoes, it stays with you until you don't exist. So please walk us through, your own journey, Shah Abdul Latif ji. Of course, if
Okay.
you can read also a few for us.
Yes, of course. Yes. Thank you. Uh, the title said, the title of this program was extremely attractive. And I want to just refer to it because I'm sure people who planned it had all that in mind. So the word magical was there, the word Sufism was there, which applies, and was to the third word there. I think she will talk about that. So when he refers to this book, it's called Seeking the Beloved, the Poetry of Shah Abdul Latif. Now, who was Shah Abdul Latif? Shah Abdul Latif was a 16th century Sufi Sindhi poet. And I really believe things happen by accident, yes and no. Because I'm a Sindhi, I was interested in my culture. But why would I go to a 16th century Sufi poet? I mean, that's the question I've always asked myself. So that's one thing. The second thing, before I read, I'll just take a minute or two to clarify some concepts and misconcepts, some understanding and non-understanding of Sufism. We associate Sufism with dance and whirling and, of course, Sufi festivals in Jodhpur and elsewhere. But when I was studying, I don't think you can translate or write about any poet without going into some depth. It has no meaning otherwise, because the words are far beyond the surface. So as I studied that, I realized that the way we are told about Sufism, what we read about Sufism, is rather exotic. But for the poets of that century, and it came, as you all may know, from Turkey, Persia, Afghanistan, for them it was a reality. I'll just point out 2 or 3 concepts to help you understand. I guess Sufism in general and Shah Latif in particular. So the first thing is that, to my mind, the Sufis want to establish a direct relationship with the divine. Direct is the word. They want to experience the divine, of course, in their life, as did the Vedanta scholars and the practicing poets. But they are very sure that they want a direct relationship, and that comes from a certain historical basis of the mullahs and the traditions of that time being so dominating. People were forced into performing rituals, whether it's Hinduism or in Islam, and the Sufis sort of broke away from that. So how did they break away? They are often my own mother, who was in Pakistan, where before partition, uh, told me that, oh, Sufi log aate the and they used to be drunk and used to dance, which is not true, really, because we look at the outward behavior and not the inner, what they really seek. And I did meet some here. There are not many Sufis in India that I know of. And the other point I want to make, okay, they were against all dogmas. The other thing was in that century, 16th, before that, I think 12th or 13th, there was a Sufi poet called Mansoor. And he said, I am God. I am the truth. And he was stoned to death. And it's very relevant in our times also what's happening. And there were one or two sentences in the translation which were so against whether Hindus or Muslims or the mullahs. I was wondering whether to include them or not. And I am translating another poet, Sachal, who was even more outspoken. But you say, I am God, it doesn't mean that you are God. You're really one with Him. But people take it at face value. I am God. So let's stone this fellow to death. So that's what happened. And after these basic concepts, I think we should all realize that Sufi poetry is very symbolic. You know, it has a lot of course, there are alliterations and there is the usual metaphors and similes, and it's very, very rich. It draws upon Persian poetry a lot. But the only thing is that unless you understand these symbols very well, we don't know what they are talking about very often. So that makes it quite different from our own English poetry that we have been used to, grown up with. So for me, a whole sort of world opened up there, because symbolism, the way it is in English poetry, is sort of limited. And we were talking about, his father has translated Lal Ded. And he said that we as translators have to negotiate the word because there is no English word. So what do? I often leave the original word, which cannot be translated, which I think is fine because you get the context of it. And those who really want to go into it in some depth, there are lots of sources available with AI and whatnot. Maybe nonsense, but they're there. As he said, you have to negotiate it. So whatever we say in English may not be the gospel or the truth. So let us try. Okay, I'll start. It's a fairly thick book with about 300 pages. I'll start in the beginning. Shah Latif often directly addressed his, I guess, his devotees, because it was sung. Remember, in that time there was no writing it. They sang it. So anyway, this is in translation. Listen, listen, ignorant one, neither lover nor beloved, neither creator nor creation is he. This secret disclose to seekers of perfection. The Lord reflects his own image, becomes his own beloved, embraces his own creation. He is that, this, life, death, friend, enemy, breath of breath is he. One palace, numerous doors, mirrored windows. I see you everywhere. How should I describe your countless manifestations, my Lord? Is it clear? There's some echoing here.
It's clear, beautiful.
Oh, okay, and I'll a bit more, yeah. Okay, now just in the next page, he's used a lot of symbols, Now, in the olden days, they had the gallows, remember? And people went to, their heads got cut off. So, how have they used this symbol? The head in Sufism refers to the ego. Without the ego, like Shah Latif has said, you cannot cross the ocean. The ocean is, of course, to reach the divine. So here he writes, will you follow me to the gallows, my friend? The gallows await those who seek the beloved. If your love is true, first cut off your head. If your love is true, first cut off your head. Lover, do not return till you are beheaded. Of course, it's the ego he's referring to. See them celebrate at the gallows. Why hesitate? Why break your vows with love? Come, come, be butchered. Up on the scaffold, lovers do not quiver. Behold, eyes meet. Gallows turn into garlands. And he goes on with so much imagery that it's almost wonder what you are reading, as I did when I first translated. I'll just read a little and then go on to how he deals with the mullahs and people of his time who were ready to stone them to death. So remember, it's a very delicate maneuver. So the next imagery that comes on the next page itself is, why blame the dagger? Why blame the dagger when the butcher holds the handle? Who would the butcher be? Divine, God. Why blame the dagger when the butcher holds the handle? The beloved's behavior causes even steel to quiver. Lovers are transformed. I pray for the dagger to be blunt. Let it linger a little bit longer in the beloved's hands. And in the very next page, he goes on to the wine imagery, which you must have, you may have known in Omar Khayyam. Just one sip of that priceless wine. For just one sip, they sacrifice life.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. And please get hold of this book. And it's beautiful. It's outside. Read it. Maybe a line will stay with you and then give it away. Thank you so much. So Manjul, first of all of us know Bulle Shah. I mean, kind of keep listening to songs of Bulle Shah, Abida Parveen, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, Rabi Shergill, and the songs of Mirabai. So please talk to us about, Bulle Shah, Mirabai, your own journey. Of course, please, yeah.
I'm Manjul, and I've been on this journey of translating the mystic poets, and the first two books of this series, the Book of Bulla and the Songs of Mira, which is very, very new. It came out yesterday. So what started me on the journey of translation was that I have roots in Punjab. I understand the language, but I cannot speak it, and there's no one there to explain it to me really in my family. And Bulle Shah is all around us. It began with Rabi Shergill's Bulla Ki Jana Main Kaun, and then he is all through Bollywood music, he's all through the popular music, and there's this frustration to understand him and not get to him. And I consulted many translations which didn't do it for me. So I decided to do my own, and it's one of many translations. What I sort of seek is a certain lucidity, a certain melody of meaning. And I'll read out a few translations for you instead of talking about the book, but it lays out Bulleh Shah's life and times. It lays out the Kafi style, the Qawwali tradition, and what Bulla has been to us in popular culture. So this book begins with a doha. Kam Bulla, chal Bulla utthe chaliye jithe sare anne, na koi sadi jaat pehchane, na koi sano manne. So Bulla's poetry, his songs, the Kafi is really at the intersection of music and poetry. It goes together. They're about going beyond differences. That was his major message, that the soul is neither Hindu nor Muslim. Just sit at the wheel and spin. It's your karma that matters. And he was also a big iconoclast. He did not like formal rituals in religions. So the piece I'll start with is Bulla Ki Jana Main Kaun, since everybody is familiar with this. And I'll just do the translation. I don't have the originals in this book. Bulla, how do I know who I am? I am not a believer among believers, nor am I a disbeliever, neither pure nor unclean, neither Moses nor Pharaoh. Bulla, how do I know who I am? I am not in the Vedas or scriptures, nor in alcohol or drugs. I am not a drunkard or a repentant, not asleep nor awake. Bulla, how do I know who I am? Neither saint nor sinner, neither happy nor unhappy, neither fire nor water, neither earth nor wind. Bulla, how do I know who I am? I do not know the secret of religions. I was not born of Adam and Eve. I am without a name, without faith or disbelief. Bulla, how do I know who I am? I know only myself, nothing other than the self, nothing greater than the self. Who then is this I see watching me? Okay, the next piece is Roze Hajj Namaz. Fasts, prayers, pilgrimages, O Mother. With the lovers coming, I forgot them all. When news of his arrival came, I forgot my grammar and logic. As his music began to play, fasts, pilgrimage, prayers gave way. Once the lover was in my home, I forgot what the holy books say. Everywhere you look, you can see him, inside and outside. He holds sway. People are deluded, O Mother, going after fasts, prayers, pilgrimages. Fasts, prayers, pilgrimages, O Mother, with the lovers coming, I forgot them all. Okay, now two very short pieces to show you what was the belief system that Bulleh Shah was coming from. He hated all kinds of ritual and the domination of the clerics. So this is called Eat What is Forbidden. Bulla, eat what is forbidden. Be in gratitude. Leave the mosque, avoid torment, seek solitude. Don't ask riddles whose answers are hidden. Come, let's go where wine is not forbidden. All right, another couplet. He did a lot of dohas. This book contains only his dohas and kafis, not the more complex forms like the Baramaha. Drink wine. Bulla, drink wine, eat kebabs, use your bones as fuel. Go burgle God's house, go rob that thug most cruel. So, and now for a slight change of pace. Most of us know Mirabai. She has most of her history is gathered from her poetry itself. She is not in the records and annals of Rajasthan because She was a childless woman, a widow at that. She did not have disciples. So what survived of Meera through the years was just the power of her own poetry. And the Rajput clans she belonged to didn't care much for her brand of feminism or her speaking up against capitalist values or patriarchy or the fact that she was something of a dancing queen. She was going from place to place singing, and her work is available in an amazing number of languages across northern India because she traveled through her life. And very little of Meera's poetry is documented. We only have 8 pieces in this book which are genuinely traceable to her times, which were there in the 1600 AD. So I'll read 2 of those pieces because they are absolutely original. And what strikes out to me is how the erotic component of what we know as genuine, authentic Mirabai in manuscript is slightly more pronounced than the sanitized, more bhajan version of Meera, which got revived in the early 20th century and what we really know as Meera. But both are incredibly beautiful. So the first piece is called How to Tell True Love. What is true love related to? Ask Vrishbhanu's daughter. Vrishbhanu's daughter is Radha. What is true love related to? Ask Vrishbhanu's daughter. Drench red in her passion for Madan Mohan, the erotic charmer. Love's chains are powerful, controlling even an elephant in rut. Meera's lord is the clever mountain bearer. His palace is her bower. So Meera's lord is the clever mountain bearer, is her signature line. Meera re Prabhu Giridhar Nagar. Then this one is one of my favorite pieces from the book. As the night falls. As the night falls, someone speaks, clearing the throat, falling. Come to the courtyard. Experienced women loosen their tresses, letting the fragrance of flowers spread, hair cascading down their bodies like bees hovering around honey. Every limb of the body bears love marks. How can one describe what happens? Meera's lord, mountain bearer, owns the night. It belongs to the blue lotus. This is a really powerful piece, and just remember this was the 15th century, and the body still wore love marks. So, much of what we know of Meera's life is contained in her poems. So I'm going to read one which is about the run. Have I time, or should I skip?
Yeah, just one, of course.
1 or 2, I'll skip, decide accordingly.
Yeah. One.
Okay, so I'll skip the one about the king then, and I'll read this one, Jotum Toro. It's very melodious, and I like it a lot. You can break it off. It's not possible for me. Forsaking you, Krishna, where will I go? You are the tree, I am a leaf. You are the lake, I am a fish. You are the mountain, I am its spur. You are the moon, I the partridge who longs for it. You can break it off. It's not possible for me. You are the pearl, I am the string. You are the gold, I am its auspiciousness. Meera says, dweller of Braj, you are the master, I the slave. Forsaking you, Krishna, where will I go? So that's it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. The songs of Meera and Bulle Shah, please, Thank you so much, Manjul. Thank you so much, Anju. Thank you so much. I was thinking while we walk back, maybe Amy can sing a Punjabi song, or a Hindi song. I'll leave it to you. Of course.
I just sing Shiv Kumar Batalvi, Punjab's beloved poet, just 4 lines from his song, since we are talking about the saints and Sufis of the subcontinent. ਕੀ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹੋ ਹਾਲ ਫਕੀਰਾਂ ਦਾ, ਕੀ ਪੁੱਛਦੇ ਹੋ ਹਾਲ ਫਕੀਰਾਂ ਦਾ, ਸਾਡਾ ਨਦੀਆਂ ਵਿਛੜੇ ਨੀਰਾਂ ਦਾ, ਸਾਡਾ ਹੰਝਦੀ ਜੂਨੇ ਆਇਆਂ ਦਾ, ਸਾਡਾ ਦਿਲ ਜਲ